Hello, everybody. Greetings from very windy and stormy Ireland. It's fantastic to be live streaming again. I've had a rather busy month, so I can't believe it's been about 2.5 weeks since I last had a chat with you all online. So do please feel free to say hi, drop a little comment in the chat facility. I see Mary is here. Happy Saturday. Sun is out in Connecticut. Well, I can assure you it's rather windy and stormy here, and I'm hoping I'm not going to have a tree down this evening or lose power during the broadcast. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicola Brown. I am a textile artist living and working in rural Ireland. I'm primarily a wet felter, an eco printer, and I grow my own dye plants. And I do everything in a sustainable and health conscious way possible. So I specialize in working without traditional mordants and working with limited vegetation to get washable and strong colors on my textiles. So for those of you who have not actually participated in one of these events before. First of all, if you are watching on Facebook rather than YouTube, if you haven't given StreamYard permission, what happens is I will actually just see something here and it will say Facebook user. But if you check up on top of your screen, you may very well be able to allow StreamYard access and we'll be able to see your name and your face as well. So it's fantastic. So many people are here already. I'm going to get absolutely straight into things now. But if you're not familiar with the format, I have nobody helping me here. And if you have a question that you would like to ask me about something I'm discussing, it would be really helpful if you put 3 question marks at the beginning of the comment, then ask your question and 3 question marks at the end. Because as we progress, it's hard for me to actually read every single comment, whereas if there are some question marks, I should be able to see them. So the first thing I would like to say is that what I'm going to be talking about is the metal pots that give the best results when you are eco printing without a mordant. And you might be saying, what is eco printing in the dirty pot, or what is working without a mordant? You mightn't actually know what a traditional powdered mordant is. So that's where I'm actually going to start with now. I'm going to keep this simple. I like to strip everything back to the basics, and I hope I make it simple for people to follow so that everybody can have success right from the beginning. So a traditional powdered mordant is basically a chemical. It's a metal salt. It's a powder. And there are health implications with using these powders. Now, I would like to state I am not against using powdered mordants if you are doing natural dyeing, because you need to have a mordant to fix most natural dye on fabric. However, it's in the powdered form that the biggest health risk is. You do not want to inhale those powders, and it's essential to wear masks. Whereas when we're using the composition of our metal pot as a mordant, we're using something such as aluminium, cast iron, copper, maybe brass. We're using the composition of the metal to actually, in some small way, contribute to the end result and the final color that we get on our fabrics. And I have a list here of a few different pots. So pots are either what is called reactive or non-reactive. So the first pots here on this list, the aluminium or aluminum, as some of you may say, the cast iron, the copper, and the brass, they are all considered reactive. There will be a reaction with whatever goes in the pot and what you put in the pot, the fabric, whether you put vinegar in, rusty metal, whether you put a copper pipe in, there will be a reaction and you will get an influence from that on your fabric and what you are hoping to print. And then a glass pot or a stainless steel pot, those are non-reactive. That means that there will not be any reaction. It does not matter what you actually, you know, if you just were processing in water in an aluminium pot versus processing in water in a glass or stainless steel pot, you would get stronger and more washable and color fast prints in the aluminium pot. So the aluminium is reactive and the glass is not reactive, neither is stainless steel. Now, enamel pots are also not reactive because they have a coating of enamel on the inside, usually on top of cast iron. However, if you have an enamel pot, an old one, and it has chips in the enamel, then you're going to get an influence from the cast iron metal underneath. And in fact, they can be considered reactive as well. So I hope that explanation, just think of metal as reactive and think of glass and stainless steel as non-reactive, even though stainless steel is a metal, but it's non-reactive, it's stainless, and it's been manufactured in such a way that it will not give a stain. So that's the basics. So the term would be either pot as mordant or eco-printing in the dirty pot. And I would just like to say something, because many people ask, well, can I print in a glass pot or a stainless steel pot, and can I add something to it to help mimic the effect of the metal pot? You can certainly help the effect if you add in some tin foil or aluminium foil. However, I've got a question for you, and this is just the easiest way I can describe it to you. So would you play tennis with a golf club? Would you play golf with a tennis club? And the simple answer is no. And it doesn't matter how many times I get asked, can I use a stainless steel pot? Yes, you can, but you will not get the same results. And it doesn't matter how much you want to get them. You're not going to get the same results by adding aluminium foil into the stainless steel pot as if you processed in an aluminium pot or a cast iron pot. So the simple answer is you can add things, but they will not necessarily give you, or they certainly won't give you the same result. Somebody is saying, okay, so here we do have a question about, is an old enamel pot? Yes. If it has chips, you can consider it reactive. If it has no chips on the enamel inside, it's non-reactive. Somebody else is saying they like the top that I'm wearing, so I will explain a little bit more about that later. But I think I might just share a few pictures of pots, and I'll just discuss different, I have a few, what do you call them? Slides. Okay, so if you are new to eco-printing without traditional mordants, I cannot emphasize enough that an aluminium pot, if you could only buy one pot, get an aluminium pot. It's my top recommendation. I would probably do 90% of my eco-printing in an aluminium pot. Although my personal favorite, tied with aluminium, is cast iron, but that's because I like really, really dark results. So an aluminium pot is the absolute best pot. You really need to have a lid. So if there's no lid on your pot, I suggest you either manufacture a lid or try and pick one up secondhand. And the wider the pot, the better. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit shallower than my one there, but the wider pots are better than taller, narrow ones, because you can actually fit more bundles in, even though it seems strange to say that if they contain the same volume, it seems strange to think that the wider shorter pot will fit more bundles, but it does. So the best pot to start with is an aluminium pot. And the top that I'm wearing, this was processed in an aluminium pot, as indeed was this bracelet at a different time, and also my silk scarf. So the top that I'm wearing is actually lamb's wool. Maybe I'll just stand up for a second and you can see. And anytime I look at somebody else's eco prints online, if I see a sort of a grayish silvery effect in places, that tends to be from the aluminium. So this particular top, this was made Early on, when I started eco-printing lamb's wool, I commissioned the fabric from a woolen mill. So it's probably 6 years old now. And this has been through my washing machine multiple times every year. In the winter, if I'm going to events, which I didn't do during lockdown, but prior to lockdown, I would have washed this probably 3 times a week in the washing machine using an olive oil soap. And you can see clearly it's got loads of prints. It hasn't lost the vibrancy. So this is printed with onion skins and black tea in an aluminium pot. Now, it's very, very helpful to add a chunk of rusty metal into your aluminium pot, and that will help you get strong, washable, and more light, fast prints. And the rusty metal is giving an effect of ferrous sulfate, which is one of the mordants. So the aluminium pot is mimicking the effect of aluminium sulfate, and this rusty piece of metal is mimicking to some degree the effect of ferrous sulfate. And ferrous sulfate is very helpful for getting strong, washable, and more light, fast prints. So my favorite pot, as I said, is a big cast iron pot. Now, I absolutely love this pot. This particular pot is actually, the outside bit of it is galvanized steel. So you may not think it's cast iron, but there's a really, really large inner pot that's cast iron. It's got a curved bottom, and I put wood in this pot, and I fire it with wood. There's a boiler underneath, and it's absolutely amazing, and I get fantastic prints from that pot. So I'll just show you this particular piece here. That's just actually fresh out of the pot. This is printed using Eucalyptus parvifolia. That's a little red leaf that I grow here myself in Ireland, and also with some bark. Now, here's a really good question from Vez. What about galvanized steel? So I sometimes wrap bundles on galvanized steel, and I get a very interesting modification of color, but I've not seen a galvanized steel pot. So I don't know the answer, but I would definitely be very, very happy to try one. And if you look at this image of me here, on the left-hand side of the image, that darker portion to the left of that center fold, that particular piece there, that was actually wrapped up on a rusty metal pipe, and that's why there's more modification of color there. Now, somebody, I don't know who they are because they haven't given StreamYard permission to share their name, but this sounds absolutely fantastic. I finally got my aluminium pot this week, and my 6-year-old grandson can fit inside it, 160 quarts. You have made a really good investment. So I'm thrilled that you that you've got such a wonderful pot. That's absolutely marvelous. A pot is an investment. As I said, you wouldn't use a golf club to play tennis. You would buy a decent tennis racket, and you would also buy clubs if you were playing golf. I don't understand why people don't consider their pot an investment. I have no hesitation. My aluminium pot that I showed you a few minutes ago, this pot was 150 euros. And I mean, that's a lot more. If it's in dollars, it's more than that. So 150 euros, and I have had it for many years, and it is as good as the day I got it. Another note, just looking at this pot, in fact, is the inside of it will look quite dirty, but you don't have to wash it out between uses or anything. Don't worry if it gets stained, that's no problem whatsoever. And if you are actually getting value out of the video even already, please consider subscribing to my channel, because I'll be loading videos or doing live streams every week. And hit the bell and you'll get notified the next time I go live. So let's just continue. So that's that big pot. You saw that, which came out of it. But this also came out of that cast iron pot. So I love the depth of the background color and the strength of the prints when I print in a cast iron pot. I think it's really, really beautiful. But Some people may find the prints on the dark side. So I would say that definitely your first pot should be an aluminium pot. Now, let's just see here. I'm going to add some more slides to the stream. So when you're setting up a pot for the first time, if you are printing for the first time with any metal pot and you haven't got any liquid in your pot, I recommend adding some vinegar, some water, some onion skins and some eucalyptus leaves and boiling it for about an hour. You can leave the onion skins until you put your bundles in if you want, but that will give you an interesting pot liqueur basically. And so this piece here was eco printed the first day I set up a new eco printing pot, and there's plenty of lovely background color there. This here is actually linen. This was dipped in rust water. And what rust water is when you have a cast iron pot and you make homemade rust water. You just let some water sit in that. Or you have a bucket and you put some rusty horseshoes or spanners or something and some vinegar and water, and you let it sit for a little while, or you cook it for a little while. And that homemade rust water is absolutely marvelous for dipping fabric into cellulose fabric. So cotton, linen, ramie, HEMP. I'm not going to mention that word because I might get flagged for inappropriate comments here on YouTube. So please don't say the word, anybody, but HEMP fabric. And if you dip any cellulose-based fabric in your homemade rust water for 40 seconds, and then you bundle it and you process it, you get beautiful prints. So those particular prints are eucalyptus bark on linen. These prints here are eucalyptus bark and leaves on silk in the aluminium pot. These here are other eucalyptus leaves, which are very beautiful. These particular prints I did when I was facilitating a retreat, a wonderful retreat in Cole Point in Australia on Lake Macquarie. And this is actually a very, very heavy silk noil. And we never managed, unfortunately, to identify the variety of eucalyptus, but it consistently gave green prints. And you can see there is a little bit of a dark outline on those leaves. And that is really coming from the fact that I had a good bit of rusty metal in the pot. Here is an organic HEMP top, and those are cotinus leaves or smoke bush, and they react very well with cast iron and rusty metal and aluminium. That's the top there by itself. Oh, and this is actually me wearing a cashmere dress. This, if I remember correctly, this was actually printed in the cast iron pot, lovely and dark, and it's got loads of really nice hot red prints and gold prints on it. So I'm just going to check and see have any of you left questions now. Okay, so Shweta or Shweta, I'm sorry, I really am not quite sure how to pronounce your name. You'll have to tell me when we're having one of our private Zoom calls for the membership club. Onion skins don't need to be used every time at all, but I do like using them for adding depth of color to my pot. If you wanted really, really brighter shades and you didn't want very dark color, you could use just water, vinegar, and onion skins in your pot, but you won't have such strength of prints unless you really know your vegetation well. Now, let me just see. I'm going to add just a few here with onion skins. Now, some of you may have seen these before because I have shared some of these slides in previous boot camps, but I want to just explain that vegetation looks different depending on which fabric that you print on, which pipe you roll on, and which pot you process in. So this here is a Nuno felt skirt, and this was processed in an aluminium pot, the same pot actually as the top that I am wearing. So it was processed in an aluminium pot, and I had plenty of onion skins and red giving eucalyptus leaves in the water. So you can see the lines at the bottom hem of the skirt there. They're quite a golden brown color. So onion skins on a silk satin scarf that's underneath that curly raw fleece wrap. So that particular silk was rolled on a copper pipe. So Sweta or Sweta, again, apologies about my name calling, but if you want more vibrancy with your onion skins, I would roll on a copper pipe, because the copper will give you lighter and warmer colors. Whereas if you look at the scarf I'm wearing myself, this is onion skins, and this particular scarf was rolled on a rusty metal pipe. So if you prefer the more orangey gold colors, roll on a copper pipe. So this is a very, very flat matte silk. So if I look at the previous one, there's a luster to that silk and a shine, and this is very matte. And this particular upcycled shirt was printed with very little rusty metal in the pot. You can see that there's no darkness anywhere really on that particular piece. This, on the other hand, was printed with a lot of rusty metal. And this is an interesting scarf because it is comprised of silk organza, which absorbs the dye very well, but the little white dots are cotton and they don't absorb the dye. And you can see that the ends of the scarf are darker. I had wrapped this one around rusty metal as well. And here are onion skins on felt in the aluminium pot. And here are onion skins on upholstery wool, again, aluminium pot. Now I do see some questions coming in, so please can I remind you folks, if you want to ask your question, it's going to be helpful for me if you put question marks in front of it, purely because I'm monitoring this by myself as I talk and it just flags them for me. So Kimberly has a question: how much vinegar do you add? So when I'm setting up a pot, Kimberly, for the very first time, I would add at least half a litre, maybe a litre of vinegar. So that would be 1 or 2 pints if you operate pints rather than litres. But 1 or 2 pints, that's plenty for getting going. It's also, if you want to make rust water in a hurry, if you haven't got time to wait, I would also add half a litre of vinegar to my rust, the container with the rusty metal in it, and that's helpful. Now, obviously, when you're eco-printing a lot, you may choose to add more vinegar into the water. I also soak my fabric in vinegar before I print it, or I sprinkle it with vinegar. So if you're interested in learning more about the complete eco-printing process, rather than, you know, we're discussing the pots today, if you check out some of my bootcamp videos, they're on my YouTube channel. So don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel, but that will give you an indication about, there's one about making rust water, if that's what you're interested in, or there's a video, the December boot camp, and it was all about eco printing, and the video number 1 in that series will give you really good tips about setting up your pot and how to eco print. Video 2 in that series discusses all about some of the best vegetation to use when you're not using mordants, and video 3 in the December boot camp is all about eco printing on cellulose fabric. So Karen has a question about my large pot. So basically the large pot, which I will just bring up again, just so we can have a look at it. Here we go. So you can see that there are legs there, and that there's this huge big pot. And then you can see the 2 handles at the top. So the 2 handles at the top actually are not on the outside of the pot. They are actually attached to the big cast iron bit, and the cast iron bit sort of sits in at the top there. There's a curved bottom, and then around the other side, you can't see it there, there's a door that opens, and I put the wood in that door. And then the pot is raised from the ground, and the base of the frame there, it's got basically the air can come in, and the air is coming in from underneath, and that helps get the pot lit very quickly. So that's that pot. So Marilyn has a question. If I'm making rust water in a bucket, should that be used with or without the addition of a rusty object? What difference? Marilyn, you can't make rust water in a bucket without any metal if it's a plastic or a rubber bucket, but maybe your bucket is metal. But I would make rust water in a cast iron container, and if your container is not cast iron, you have to put rusty metal into the container, because I would be suggesting something like that, like a bit or a few spanners or some horseshoes. You need to have enough rust. Like a few nails is not sufficient if you're doing a lot of eco printing in the dirty pot. You need to have, rust water made up. Okay, so that's Marilyn. So I'm going to come down here. Okay, so let me just see. Okay, so aluminium is my top recommendation. Cast iron would be my second recommendation. Copper is also very beautiful, particularly if you like apricot and peach tones. Copper has a slower reaction with whatever goes in it. So you don't get the intensity of color. Like onion skins will be very much softer in a copper pot. Eucalyptus leaves that give red prints in aluminium or cast iron, they only give softer peach tones in a copper pot. And I also would put a chunk of rusty metal into a copper pot. So copper is very nice for expanding the range of colors you can achieve, but it's not the first pot that I would choose to work with. I've also tried brass, and I was exceptionally disappointed with brass. So you may be wondering what other metals you could use, but brass would not be one of my chosen metals. I only did one main session. I tried vegetation that I knew worked well in aluminium and cast iron, and I was very disappointed in brass. So that's really it, I think. I would be happy if you have more questions to shoot them in now in a comment, but maybe I've actually answered any questions you might have. So if you do have questions, let's see here now. This is all going to be in the club, Shweta, but it's not to get crisp prints. I like everything I do like this, it's done without using a barrier. And we're not discussing dye blankets or barriers now in this this video, because this video is all about the pot. But everything that I do and all the prints that I've shown you, all of them, it doesn't matter which ones they were. I'll show you a few more here. All of these, even if they have a paler background, all of these have been done with no barrier. They are all printed in submerging them in the dirty pot. So you get crisp prints if you tie your pieces, your bundles tightly, if you use vegetation that gives good color, and you don't need to use a barrier. Okay, so let's see. Marilyn, I've loads of rusty things in the bucket with vinegar and water, but this is to add to my aluminium pot. Best to add just the rust water or add a bit of rusty iron too? That's a good question, Marilyn, and that all depends on what vegetation you're using and how strong the results you want are. I tend to add a good chunk of rusty metal to my pot more than I add rusty water. But if I'm in a hurry or making up a new solution, that would be when I might put more rust water in. And also, I use rust water sometimes for soaking leaves or for dipping leaves, and I always use it for dipping my cellulose fabric. So I would say that I would keep the rust water. If you wanted to top up the pot, if you weren't happy with the color on the outside of your bundles in the middle of processing, by all means add some rust water. But otherwise, I would actually just have a chunk of metal in the pot. Here's somebody saying, Sahara, just write your question. I'm happy to answer your question if I can see it. Let's see what we hear. So Sherry, hi. I prefer the brown onion skins, the colors from the brown onion skins. So the piece that I have on me, this is brown onion skins. The red ones give more of a purpley red color, which some people may very well prefer. But if you're using, if you're rolling pieces on rusty metal, you need to then neutralize them with bicarbonate of soda or baking soda or something like that. And I find that the purple or red onion skins, the purple prints that you get from the red onions, they can go more olivey green and they're a duller color. So for me, the preference is always to work with brown onions. Now, I won't throw out purple onion skins. I'll use them, but they're not my favorite onion skins. Jane, how long is a piece of string? So Jane's question is, what's the optimal percentage of vinegar? Jane, I can't really answer your question because each person is doing different things. But when I'm working and I'm preparing fabric, for example, I would say I would like to have it 50% vinegar, 50% water if I'm soaking fabric. It's not easy for me to get vinegar inexpensively here in Ireland, but if I was living in America where it's extremely cheap, white vinegar, I would be happy to work with 100% vinegar for that. And I'm very happy. I usually would put in 1/2 to 1 liter of vinegar into my big pot when I'm working. So, but as we progress, Jane, again, in the Eco Print and Felt Club, of which you're a member, once you see results from your eco printing and you upload images that I can give you feedback on, I can make suggestions and help you more with that. So Karen has a question. If you find a cracked iron pot, I think, Karen, that's because you found a series of 3. I just wouldn't. You're becoming, it's all too complicated. I just think you need to get one pot that's going to work. And I recommend that you get an aluminium pot and then you add a chunk of rusty metal in it. But I wouldn't personally try and put one pot inside another. I just think it's too much. So let's see. So Sahara's question, I think, is how long to eco print a felt piece. I think that is your question. So it all depends on the vegetation that you're actually using. So for example, this here is onion skins on felt, Sahar, and this I had in the pot for about 2 hours and 20 minutes. And the reason for that was I also had leaves on the other side. Now, onion skins give fantastic prints after 2 hours. So I just left it in a little bit longer because of the leaf prints. So you always choose how long you process your piece based on the vegetation you use. So bootcamp video number 2, eco printing in the dirty pot, on my YouTube channel will give you some ideas of different vegetation and how long to process it for. So Kimmy was wondering, can she add a tip for buying vinegar in the UK? Yes, please, Kimmy. Go ahead. Add your tip and I'll share it. So Monica has a question. So her question is, what is the primary purpose of the vinegar? So when we are working without powdered mordants, Kimmy, there are some leaves that the vinegar helps sharpen the colors. So eucalyptus leaves love an acidic environment. So if you're printing with eucalyptus leaves and you have some extra vinegar in your pot, you will get stronger prints. It's not a mordant. It doesn't chemically alter the structure of your fabric, but it does definitely, you have to trust me on this, help you get more vibrant prints. And it works really well with onion skins as well. Now, I also like to soak my protein-based fabric, that's wool and cashmere silk, with vinegar before I eco print. And again, it helps bring out the vibrancy of the prints. So excellent, Kimmy, thank you. So Kimmy is saying if you buy your vinegar from the Eastern European sections of supermarkets, it's much cheaper. And it's interesting that you say cider farms sell it cheaply, because I don't think they do in Ireland, but certainly you can also find stronger strength vinegar sometimes in Polish shops, and we've quite a few Polish shops in Ireland. I tend to treat all the vinegar about the same quantity regardless of the strength, but that is something you can do. Now here's a very interesting one. So I brew kombucha, and if it's left to ferment long enough, it turns to vinegar. Have I seen anybody using kombucha vinegar? No, Kathy, I haven't, but I have actually used wine that was like vinegar. It was from first season picked grapes in Portugal. It was horrendous. It was totally undrinkable. It tasted like vinegar, and it worked perfectly. So I think kombucha vinegar would be perfect. So I think just go for it. If you have some kombucha vinegar, just go for it. So a final shout out for questions, but if you're actually watching this on the replay, please feel free to leave me a question via the comments, and I will try and answer. It later on. I will reply to your comment. And I'm very conscious, we've had a lot of storms here in Ireland recently. There are actually a few comments on previous videos from earlier this month that I have not managed to answer yet, but I promise I will. So don't think if you leave a comment, I will not answer it. I will. So Susanna has a question here. Is it harmful to health to use a pot from my kitchen to dye with this method? And I would say yes, it is not a good idea ever to use a pot from your kitchen to eco print or do any dyeing with. But I do have one tip for you, Susanna. If you were only going to eco print using onion skins and a sprinkle of black tea, I personally would not have a problem myself with using a kitchen pot once or twice, but I would not recommend it for anything that wasn't food grade vegetation. So I would never put a eucalyptus leaf in or anything. But if you had a pot and you wanted just to have a little experiment and use onion skins, you could use a kitchen pot, but otherwise it's a big no-no. You need to have totally separate dye pots from your cooking pots. And just speaking of cooking pots as well, a really fantastic pot to have is a fish kettle. So those are long pots. They come in different lengths for big fish. And the reason they're really good is you can put long pipes in them, and often they don't contain that much water. They come to the boil very quickly, and you can actually process quite large pieces in them. So if you have a fish kettle, they are definitely a good investment. So I think that's it for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this chat, and keep an eye out for whatever video or live stream I upload next week. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your interest. Thank you very much for your comments. And as I say, if you're watching this as a replay rather than live, please leave your questions as a comment and I will definitely get back to you. And Sahar has a question about using rice vinegar. I would say yes. I actually have rice vinegar myself in my kitchen. It's not as strong as the other vinegar. So maybe I would say use twice the amount. So maybe use 2 liters instead of 1. It doesn't taste as acidic to me, but you could absolutely use rice vinegar without a doubt. So thank you all so much. I'm going to say over and out from Clasheen now. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thank you very much for joining me and for your questions and your support. Over and out until next time.